The trial of conflict resolution efficiency, subsection 19F, took place every orbital cycle on the planet Graxel-Terra, a world known for its meticulously categorized mountains and color-coded weather systems. Today, a human stood on the central dais. This was a problem. Major Inzarthal, head adjudicator and wearer of ceremonial shoulder epaulets denoting 9 cycles of conflict arbitration, peered over his crystalline data slab and hissed-clicked in bureaucratic consternation. "This is not the one we ordered," he muttered to his junior aide. "No, adjudicator. The file says human strategist first-class Dexter Grimsby, known alias Dex, was transferred by special request from the Terran Conflict Mediation Corps." Inzarthal tilted his huge, multi-eyed head. Special request from who? The aide double-checked. Himself. Dex, meanwhile, was lounging like he was on a beach in Santorini, arms behind his head, a thermochromatic drink slowly shifting colors next to him. His uniform was unbuttoned at the collar, and he wore sunglasses, which no one else had thought to bring because there was no sun on Graxel-Terra, only ambient light controlled by precise algorithms. "Let's get this party started," Dex said cheerily, tapping the side of his comm bead. "I've got brunch in 4 hours on Caerleon Prime, and I'd rather not be late." "Human," Inzarthal said, rising with all the gravitas of a collapsing bureaucracy. "You are here to represent your species in the simulated strategic engagement scenario, a trial intended to evaluate interspecies command efficacy under standardized combat parameters. Your opponent will be Commander Vrash Talkaven," Dex finished, taking a lazy sip of his drink. Yeah, the Banshee of Sector Rho, conqueror of the Storm Moons, I read the brochure." Vrash, a towering slab of armored chitin and pulsing muscle, glared from across the simulation chamber. His 6 claws clenched rhythmically, a ritual of internal balance designed to prevent unnecessary vivisection. "You mock the trial," Vrash snarled, voice like stone grating on metal. "I mock everything, but don't take it personally," Dex replied. "I mock because I care." Inzarthal raised a limb, signaling silence. "You are to deploy your forces according to Simulation Protocol Alpha Gamma 6. Once the hologrid activates, you may engage." Dex said, grinning. "About that." The grid flared, 2 armies materialized, one insectal and chittering, positioned with surgical precision, the other. Well, there wasn't another. Dex's side was empty, not just devoid of troops, devoid of anything, not even terrain. "Is this a protest?" Inzarthal asked, wings twitching in legal agitation. "Nope," Dex said, standing up and stretching. "This is me winning." The hologrid flickered. The enemy army began to advance, but the simulation paused again. Error symbols flashed. A warning siren beeped politely. Vrash looked confused. "Why is your territory emitting diplomatic protocols?" Dex nodded toward the grid. "Because I hacked the scenario to broadcast unconditional surrender from your army's own comm channel. 10 seconds ago, your troops think you already lost. Morale's tanked. They're refusing to engage." Vrash's eyes dilated. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible. Your scenario uses the Graxilian Open War Engine, version 12.3. I found a flaw in its logic tree regarding surrender conditions. I fed it a recursive loop through your own encrypted code, which I cracked, by the way, because someone left their encryption password as Vrash 123. Gasps echoed through the tribunal. "That is a personal password," Vrash growled. "Yeah, it should stay that way." The simulation beeped one final time, then shut down. On the display, bold characters flashed. Conflict ENDD. Human victory BY default. Silence. Then 100 limbs shot into the air, chittering in formal objection. Data slabs were flung. Inzarthal collapsed backward in his floating chair, limbs flailing like a bureaucratic jellyfish. "This violates every procedural statute of simulated conflict engagement," someone screeched. Dex tossed back the last of his drink and smiled at the uproar. "Hey, you said win a conflict. You didn't say I had to fight one." 45 minutes later, Dex sat in the ornate holding room known as the pre-appeal suspension atrium. He was playing a harmonica he'd smuggled in via diplomatic exemption. It played the opening bars of Ride of the Valkyries. A lawyer slug slithered in. Its suit was pressed so tightly it looked vacuum-sealed. "Mr. Grimsby," it rasped, "the tribunal is convening an emergency session. The legitimacy of your victory is under scrutiny. They're calling it preemptive termination without procedural engagement." "Let me guess, they're worried I broke the spirit of the law." "Correct. I am the spirit of the law, hungover maybe, but still the spirit." The slug blinked, possibly, or just oozed with incredulity. "Can I counterfile?" Dex asked. "You may submit a statement of strategic justification." Dex cracked his knuckles and smiled. "Perfect. Let me tell you a story about Earth chess, bananas, and how to ruin a war without firing a single shot." The Tribunal of Procedural Warfare, Emergency Session 991C, assembled under a haze of legal caffeine stimulants and collective confusion. 100 alien delegates crowded the upper amphitheater. They stared down at the circular chamber, where Dex stood with the smug detachment of a man whose plans extended at least 7 layers deeper than anyone else in the room. Inzarthal, still recovering from an acute case of systemic affront, resumed his place as High Adjudicator. His robes had been hastily steamed, and his primary eye twitched in patterns indicative of imminent paperwork violence. "You have submitted," he croaked, "a statement of strategic justification consisting of, and I quote, 'Suck it, nerds, a manifesto.'" Dex shrugged. I was feeling inspired. Vrash stood again, not as a commander this time, but as a plaintiff. His mandibles clicked in outrage. The human subverted the trial through technological sabotage and psychological trickery. Dex pointed a finger. "You were tricked, but I didn't sabotage anything. I just persuaded your war engine to tell your troops that you already lost, which, let's be honest, you did the moment you underestimated me." Inzarthal buzzed loudly. "Silence. This tribunal demands an official recounting of the human strategy, step by step. Transparency will determine legitimacy." "Gladly," Dex said, stepping into the center of the chamber. "But I warn you, my methods aren't what you'd call textbook, unless the textbook was banned for being too effective." He tapped a small device. A hollow display ignited, showing a digital diagram of Vrash's simulated army with dozens of pop-up annotations that blinked erratically, highlighting flaws. "First, I infiltrated your unit deployment algorithms 2 days before the trial. How? You let me watch a training demo where your troops used default field placements. I mirrored your pattern to a Terran game called Banana Ball. Don't ask. Just know that your entire front line moved like overcooked spaghetti." Vrash's upper claws twitched. "Next, I slipped a Trojan signal packet into the simulation's morale subroutine. It activated precisely 6 seconds after scenario launch, triggering a diplomatic cascade inside your own AI command structure. Your command tree mistook itself for a defeated faction. Boom, panic, retreat, collapse." Murmurs echoed across the chamber. Several adjudicators turned to their aides and demanded, in urgent whispers, a definition of Banana Ball. "And for the finale," Dex said, walking a slow circle around the chamber, "I dropped a carefully timed audio broadcast into the simulation's ambient channel. A single Terran phrase, barely audible. He played it, a soft voice said, 'Abort mission, total loss, retreat.'" Inzarthal raised a limb. "That is an act of psychological conditioning." Dex beamed. "Thank you. I take pride in my work." The legal slug, now Dex's reluctantly assigned defense liaison, rippled in horror. "You rewrote the battlefield into a staged psychodrama." "Please, I edited it. You'd already staged the drama yourselves." Vrash's claws slammed into the stone floor, cracking it. This was meant to be a test of strength, not deceit. "Ah," Dex said, "but that's where you slipped. You forgot that humans invented strength through deceit. You bring armies, we bring lawyers, illusions, and caffeine-fueled spite." A panel of elders, pale, gas-bag-like beings suspended in nutrient jelly, blinked in slow, gelatinous horror. One emitted a bubble that translated into, but he didn't engage. He ended the trial before it began. That's never been done. Dex raised his hands. "Exactly. I ended the conflict with 0 casualties, minimal power usage, and a 100% success rate. If that's not efficient command, I don't know what is." Inzarthal's secondary mandibles clacked. This calls the entire simulation model into question. If the human can terminate combat through manipulation, does that not render all results unreliable? Unreliable, Dex said, or finally honest. You wanted to measure effectiveness. I showed you what actual victory looks like. No war, just a complete, total checkmate before you even realized you were on the board. The tribunal fell into stunned silence. Then came the laughter. It was low at first. One of the methane-based delegates began wheezing uncontrollably. A crystalline octopoid began vibrating in what could only be described as ironic amusement. Within moments, half the tribunal was erupting in conflicting expressions of disbelief, horror, and reluctant admiration. "You broke the trial," someone muttered. "No," said another, "he broke us." Dex tipped an imaginary hat. Inzarthal twitched again. "Very well. Until a final ruling is issued, the human will be placed under cognitive quarantine. He is not to access any networked systems, weaponized metaphors, or ironic subtext." "Too late for that last one," Dex said, already lounging against the wall. He was escorted gently but firmly into a containment chamber lined with algorithm-nullifying fields. It was the kind of place built for dangerous entities. Reality was slightly muffled in there. Time passed in polite loops, and the walls were padded in five-dimensional foam. An alien psychologist in a lab coat floated in. "Do you know why you're here, Mr. Grimsby?" Dex leaned back, hands behind his head again. "Because the galaxy's favorite trial just found out it's been speedrun." The psychologist blinked. Speedrun. A Terran tradition, finishing something faster than the creators ever thought possible, with style. The alien floated closer. "But you didn't just finish, you ended it, from outside, without participating." Dex smiled. "That," he said, "was the whole point." The walls hummed with existential concern. Outside the chamber, debates flared. Inside, Dex began whistling again. It was Bohemian Rhapsody this time. The Galactic Tribunal's central datanet, normally reserved for legislative updates, strategic treaties, and extremely polite threat assessments, was aflame. "Human ends conflict before it begins. Simulation in crisis," read one headline. "Trial invalidated by tactical absurdity," read another. "Is warfare obsolete or just embarrassed?" was trending galaxy-wide. Inside his null-field cell, Dexter Grimsby was engaged in his most dangerous activity yet, waiting. He was utterly still, but radiating the kind of calm usually reserved for apex predators or overly confident cats. The chamber door hissed open, not the usual therapist this time. Instead, in walked Arch-Admiral Velen Drax of the Unified Battle Doctrine Command. Her uniform was pressed with such precision it could slice through diplomatic tape. She walked with the terrifying grace of someone who once negotiated a ceasefire by cracking her knuckles. "Human," she said. Dex looked up. "Oof, you're the one they call the Velvet Guillotine, right? Love the boots." Velen didn't blink. "You broke a 1,000-year-old military evaluation system. You're trending on 17 threat databases, and 3 species have formally added your face to their cultural mythos under trickster god classifications." Dex pointed at himself, impressed. "Honestly, that's record time. You also caused the collapse of 2 betting pools and destabilized the entire simulation integrity board. Not my fault you people gamble on procedure like it's a sport, which, by the way, Bananaball is. I've got merch if you're interested." She tossed a data chip onto the table between them. It skidded like an accusation. Dex examined it lazily. "What's this? Reboot patch, apology note, strongly worded poem." "A mission." Dex raised an eyebrow. "You're being conscripted," Velen said flatly. "Field test, real engagement, no simulations. We're dropping you into an escalating planetary dispute on Raxos 9. Local factions, civil unrest, no rules." He grinned. "Oh, you're scared." Velen's eyes narrowed. "You can't hack morale into submission in the real world." Dex leaned forward. "Can't I?" He was escorted from the chamber 15 minutes later. The cell door closed behind him like a relieved sigh. Guards flanked him, heavily armored and emotionally distant. The transport ship was already humming on the landing pad, preloaded with a diplomatic kit, 6 languages, worth of insult filters, and a bag of Terran trail mix labeled emergency peacekeeping rations. As the ship blasted off toward Raxos 9, Dex reclined in his seat and opened the briefing file. 2 factions, the Red Directive and the Green Sovereignty, same species, same planet. Bitter enemies because their ancestors disagreed on the correct number of ceremonial feathers for official greetings. "You're kidding me," Dex muttered. "This is a war over hats." Technically, it was about ancestral identity preservation and ceremonial heritage consistency. But the file repeatedly mentioned feather density ratios, so he felt justified. He touched his comms. "Ship AI, open broadcast channel." "Specify recipient," the AI chirped. "Both factions, all frequencies." A pause. "Do you wish to declare intent?" "Yeah, I intend to make them question their entire reality." The AI beeped in agreement, a rare display of solidarity. Raxos 9 looked like a gemstone someone had stepped on, gleaming crystal forests, jagged obsidian ridges, and cities that pulsed with bioluminescent defiance. The Red Directive had barricaded the south. The Green Sovereignty held the north. A valley between them, sacred neutral ground, now bristled with artillery and symbolic flags taller than most buildings. Dex stepped onto the valley floor in a bright yellow hoodie that said Mediator. "Don't shoot, I'm fragile," in 6 languages. Drones hovered, guns twitched, radio silence stretched. Then came the voice of Red Commander Ulver Tech, sharp, nasal, and utterly without patience. "You dare enter the rift of division, uninvited." "Yup," Dex said, setting down a small table, 1 chair, and a large steaming pot labeled diplomacy soup. Green High Captain Riva Lana spoke next, voice dripping disdain. "State your allegiance." Dex spooned soup into a bowl. "My allegiance is to whoever stops yelling first." Riva hissed, Ulvir snarled. Dex held up a finger. "Hold that rage. You've been fighting for 86 years over ceremonial feathers. I propose a solution." He pulled out 2 hats, identical, perfectly symmetrical. "One for each of you, same size, same feathers. No winner, no loser, just co-goofy." Ulvir barked, "We will not wear unaligned plumage." Riva growled, "This is a mockery." Dex shrugged, "Okay, then fight to the death over millenary semantics. But before you do, I hacked your archives, your ancestors. Yeah, it turns out the feather thing, total mistranslation. The original decree was about seasonal rationing. Someone mistook wheat yield for feather count during a glyph reformatting 5 centuries ago." Both commanders froze. "Impossible," Ulvir whispered. "Cross-check the original etchings. They were upside down. You've been feather fighting over grain taxes." Riva stumbled backward. "No, we have museums, statues, entire operas." "Yup, all celebrating a historical misunderstanding, so dumb it might legally qualify as a sitcom." Silence fell, a bird chirped, probably sarcastically. Then red troops began murmuring. Green troops looked at their flags, then each other. One soldier from each side approached Dex, looked at the identical hats, and tried them on. They fit. They looked ridiculous. They laughed. It spread. Within 10 minutes, rival commanders were screaming at their historians. Within 20, Dex was back aboard his shuttle, sipping tea and watching live footage of both armies participating in the first-ever Joint Feather Festival. He sent a transmission to Velen Drax. Mission complete. Hostilities ended via historical correction, costume therapy, and soup. Her reply was a single, quiet line. "This shouldn't work. Nothing about you should work." Dex grinned. "I know, isn't it great?" The tribunal hadn't ruled yet. But they would. Because next, he planned to put the entire concept of trial warfare on trial. By the time Dexter Grimsby returned to Graxel Terra, the tribunal chamber had upgraded its defenses. Not militarily, psychologically. The walls now displayed rotating affirmations in multiple languages. The law is infallible, chaos is containable, and humans are not that clever. It wasn't working. Dex strolled in like he'd just been nominated for Best Picture and knew he'd won. He wore a suit patterned with a fractal map of every system he'd ever disrupted. His tie was blinking Morse code that spelled, "Still undefeated." The room quieted, though no one had ordered it to. Half the tribunal had gone into emergency sabbatical, the other half had gone off counselor. In Zarthal, now down 2 sets of functional mandibles and 3 mental stabilizers, looked like a bureaucratic ruin held together by paperwork and vengeance. "Grimsby," he croaked, "explain yourself." "Which part, the hats, the soup, or the shared national anthem I made using only insult phrases and a banjo?" "All of it." Dex spun in a circle. "Well, I was told to validate my conflict resolution strategy in a real-world scenario. I did. Peace achieved. 0 casualties. Cultural unification. Bonus tourism revenue from the Joint Feather Festival. I've already sold a line of novelty hats." "This is not how wars are supposed to end," Vrash bellowed, his voice hoarse from weeks of disbelief therapy. "And yet they keep ending when I show up," Dex said. "Weird, huh?" The tribunal conferred in a hushed frenzy. A decision had to be made. Not about guilt, no one could quite prove he'd broken any rules, but about the implications. The danger of someone like Dex operating unchecked. "He bypasses conflict entirely," muttered one judge. "He weaponizes absurdity," whispered another. "He's too effective." The phrase struck the chamber like a gavel to the temple. Too effective. That was the problem. Not inefficient, not reckless, not violent. Effective in a way that broke the system simply by working better than it. The elder adjudicators summoned a closed judgment session. All non-essential personnel were dismissed. Dex was ordered to wait in the Hall of Contemplative Neutrality. He left a flamingo-shaped inflatable on the dais before departing. The hall was quiet, too quiet, not dramatic quiet, not ominous quiet, deliberately designed to prevent mischief quiet. White walls, soothing lights, air-laced with mild focus enhancers, a boredom fortress. Dex paced. Then he stopped pacing and opened his travel bag. From it, he removed a small, humming cube marked "in case of ethical emergency." He pressed it. Within seconds, an illicit broadcast signal was live. Across half the quadrant, the tribunal's secret proceedings were being streamed to civilian channels, with Dex providing commentary. "Welcome back to Grimsby's Galactic game show. Today's challenge: can the most advanced judicial system in the known universe survive one very sarcastic man with Wi-Fi?" Inside the chamber, the judges froze. A holographic feed popped up above their heads, their own faces, live, confused, and globally humiliated. "First question," Dex's voice rang out. "If a trial ends before it starts, and the enemy is too confused to continue, is that victory or performance art?" Inzarthal hissed, "Cut the feed." Technicians scrambled. None succeeded. Dex had rerouted the entire planetary broadcast relay through the gift shop. "Second question," Dex continued, voice far too cheerful. "If someone prevents war using lies, loopholes, and light musical accompaniment, did they break the rules, or did the rules just finally meet their match?" He reappeared in the chamber doorway, sipping something fluorescent and probably illegal. "I call for a reverse trial." Silence. Vrash stared. "A what?" Dex held up a slim, bound document. "I hereby motion to place the tribunal itself under examination, not me, you, for the crime of designing a system that values ritual over results." Laughter rippled through the audience levels, not amusement, relief, catharsis. The kind of laugh you get when the water finally breaks the dam. "You can't put us on trial," Inzarthal said, tone dangerously close to a squeal. "Can and did, Article 7b, subclause beta tau," Dex said, flipping to the page. "Anyone may call for an inversion hearing if they believe the tribunal's methods have produced paradoxical or counterproductive outcomes." That clause was a joke addition from the Humor Committee. Dex nodded, and I am deeply committed to honoring all jokes. The inversion hearing convened 2 hours later. In an unprecedented twist, Dex stood not as defendant, not as strategist, but as prosecutor. The tribunal sat behind glass, forced to watch themselves be interrogated in real time while surrounded by a jury of multi-species civilians selected for maximum emotional volatility. The trial began. Dex paced before the gallery. Ladies, gentlemen, gelatinous entities of various moral alignment, we are here because a system built to manage conflict is now afraid of peace. He gestured toward a hologram showing a timeline of Dex-related incidents. Every single one ended faster than projections, with fewer losses, and in some cases, a 300% increase in local musical output. Ask yourselves, why is success treated like a threat? Why is victory by unconventional means seen as invalid? The system is afraid of me because I didn't follow its script. Because I used improvisation, illusion, and logic so sharp it made them bleed internally. He spun the hologram. Now it showed an ancient war simulation document from Graxelterra's early history. He highlighted a phrase, conflict must be observable to be valid. There it is, Dex said. The fatal flaw. You're not judging results, you're judging performances. You don't want peace, you want pageantry. You want explosions, casualty graphs, morale charts. You want to watch things break so you can feel like you're fixing them. Murmurs, one of the jury members, a sentient vapor in a containment suit, began sobbing softly. Dex pointed at the tribunal. You want proof? Fine. Show me one regulation that says a war has to be fought to be won. None came. He leaned against the bench, smug and serene. This isn't a rebellion, it's a reminder. The galaxy doesn't need more perfectly measured battles. It needs solutions that work, even if they come with banjos. The jury deliberated for 6 minutes and 34 seconds. A record, their decision was unanimous. Verdict: the tribunal was found guilty of systemic ritualism, war addiction, and excessive resistance to innovation. Sentence: under supervision, the tribunal must be restructured. All future evaluations must account for unconventional conflict resolution, including psychological, cultural, and comedic vectors. Inzarthal fainted. Dex was awarded the galaxy's first honorary doctorate in tactical nonsense. Outside, crowds gathered. Some cheered, some rioted. One entrepreneurial species began selling commemorative hats with de-escalated emblazoned across the brim. Inside, Dex looked up at the glass ceiling of the chamber, now cracked and flickering. He smiled. The great halls of Graxelterra no longer echoed with the crisp cadence of judicial order. Instead, they reverberated with something far more dangerous: possibility. The tribunal had been sentenced, restructured technically, but everyone knew what that meant. The old guard was out, and the new one was being assembled from species who still believed in things like results and thinking. Panic reigned among the ceremonial uniform suppliers. Entire colonies went into mourning over the death of symmetrical protocol. Dexter Grimsby, on the other hand, had rented a food cart. Hot peace treaties, get your hot peace treaties here, he shouted cheerfully, slinging edible, rolled-up ceasefire forms filled with cheese and moral clarity. Half off for formerly warring states, free toppings if you renounce generational grudges. Alien diplomats in dazed clusters stumbled through the plaza, half in shock, half in culinary delight. Is this a solution stand? One asked, holding up a steaming armistice wrap. Yup, Dex said. Faster than litigation, tastier than surrender. He'd become a local deity, unofficially. A cult had sprung up called the Doctrine of the Absurd Victor. They wore hats shaped like paradoxes and held debates where losing meant you won more. The tribunal's replacement committee summoned Dex for a post-decision debrief. He brought snacks. Inside the high chamber, newly redesigned to include beanbags, flexible lighting, and a stage labeled Creative Stratagem Demonstrations, the freshly appointed Council of Adaptive Engagement sat awkwardly. Leading them was Churak, a cerebral being made entirely of vibrating microcrystals. It communicated through harmonics, and its current frequency suggested equal parts awe, apprehension, and low-key panic. Dexter Grimsby, Churak intoned, voice like wind chimes going through an existential crisis. We have reviewed your methods, and while they defy tradition, their efficacy is undeniable. Dex smiled. Look, I'm not trying to overthrow your galaxy. I just wanted to prove that conflict resolution doesn't need to be synonymous with destruction. Churak buzzed. Yet you have introduced chaos into a system designed to resist it. Chaos isn't the enemy, Dex said. Stagnation is. You locked your entire strategic doctrine in a box, handed it a rulebook, and acted surprised when someone like me kicked the box off a cliff and turned the rulebook into confetti. One of the new counselors raised a digit. What if future simulations include chaos parameters, adapt to the unpredictable? Dex clapped. Yes, that's the spirit. You don't beat chaos, you embrace it. Wrestle it into a party hat and make it teach at your military academy. Charikda pulsed with uncertain admiration. And what of you, Mr. Grimsby? What do you want? That gave Dex pause. He looked out the chamber window at the bustling plaza, the confused peacekeepers, the retired war machines now hosting puppet shows. Then he turned back, eyes gleaming. I want tenure. The council blinked. Dex explained, not at your schools. I want tenure in the system. I want permanent authority to interfere with any galactic conflict I deem unnecessarily stupid. I want full legal immunity, 5-star accommodations, and a travel stipend. Oh, and one of those robes, but in leather. Charikda vibrated so hard it briefly formed the shape of a question mark. You want to be our official wildcard. Exactly, Dex said. Make me a sanctioned force of strategic chaos, a living loophole, a one-man think tank with a banjo and questionable ethics. Silence. Then murmurs. Then, to Dex's utter lack of surprise, a vote. Result approved. The council signed the decree, Galactic Resolution Agent 1, Dexter Grimsby. Powers discretionary, methods unregulated. Objectives: minimize casualties, maximize hilarity, maintain peace, break reality only if strictly necessary. Years passed. Conflicts came and went. Dex arrived in each like a hurricane wearing sunglasses. On the moon of Krell, he ended a 4-way siege by introducing a card game called Diplomacy. The loser had to write a poem of apology in their own blood. Everyone lost. On purpose. Peace ensued. On Blixer 12, he weaponized misinterpretation, convincing both sides they had actually been allies all along due to a centuries-old linguistic quirk. Their war monument now commemorated the day they accidentally discovered brotherhood. At one point, someone tried to assassinate him with a truth bomb, a psychic device that forces your mind to accept only objective reality. Dex survived by simply not believing in it hard enough. He wrote a book, Stop Shooting, Start Scheming. It was banned in 5 sectors, required reading in 12 more. Alien academies began offering courses in Dexian asymmetric resolution theory. Students passed by successfully trolling the instructor without getting expelled. Eventually, on a calm day orbiting the glittering libraries of Thrixos Prime, an alien journalist asked him, "What are you really, strategist, trickster, philosopher?" Dex thought for a while, eyes scanning a star chart shaped like a spilled drink. "None of those," he said. "I'm just a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "That the rules don't love you back." The galactic calendar now notes one day every cycle as Grimsby Day. On that day, simulations are turned off, conflicts are paused, beverages are shared. And everyone remembers the time a single human walked into the most rigid system in the known universe and beat it without even drawing a weapon.